But we're really pleased to have you. I do feel as though I've been part of this journey with you over the last year and some more, actually. I mean, this is the second installment of this epic journey of moving to the unified client. And it's a topic that everyone really should be aware of. So, you know, if you're not already moving to the unified client, you need to be listening really careful to everything that Pippa says.
Maybe not everything. Maybe not everything.
All the good and all the bad.
Yes.
So it's going to be fantastic. So I shall now, with no further ado, hand over to you, Pippa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. As kind of Scott intimated, this talk is on GovGrant's journey to the unified client, but in a way it's also my journey to the unified client, although my journey started a lot sooner than GovGrant's, but we'll kind of cover that in today's talk. Of course the slides aren't going to work. There we go. There we go. Introduction. This is kind of what we're going to cover in today's talk. A little bit of kind of introduction, what our implementation looks like, kind of the start of the journey, the research planning. As I kind of chatted to Scott pre this presentation, I presented the beginning of this journey back in February. We're going to kind of talk about everything that happened before the Cambridge event. Did we meet our Easter deadline? The 2 weeks preceding the upgrade, what happened during the upgrade weekend, go live, and then a retrospective 2 months on, and then looking at resources. So a few introductions. So I'm going to introduce you to the company that I work for. I work for a little company called GovGrant. We're one of the oldest established innovation tax specialists in the country, and we work with a range of different companies across the UK. We support businesses in developing R&D, patent box and capital allowances, tax reliefs, and we've successfully processed nearly 7,000 claims. We've got an inquiry rate of 0.2%, and that's the sales pitch done. Because I look after the CRM system and the users, and whilst this does mean a little bit to me, it's kind of not what I do on a day-to-day. As Scott kind of said, my name's Pippa. I started my Dynamics journey as a salesperson back in 2014. I then kind of saw the light and moved into Dynamics administration and customization in June 2017. I'm a committee member of the Cambridge DC365 user group, and I joined GovGrant in August 2019 as the systems data and MI analyst. It does mean I wear many hats, as you'll understand a little bit further on in the presentation. I'm really passionate about visualization, data, training, and getting the most out of the data for my users and supporting them as best I can. Hobbies include crafting, video gaming, and as you can see from the picture, chicken wrangling. So if you want to talk about chickens, I'm possibly the lady to speak to. Feel free to kind of add me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm not that active, but I follow a lot of people. So our implementation is, I would say, probably on the small side. This is GovGrant's implementation. We went live in the summer of 2017, so we're about 3 years old now. We've got a user base of about 70 with a mixture of full and team licenses. We will cover some of the issues with licensing later on. We do have a partner. They are Clear Aim Consulting, and Nathan and the gang are really good in supporting me in terms of code development. I can handle a lot of the customization and everything that goes with that, but when it comes to code and further development, ClearAim are our partner. We have fantastic executive support for the system. I couldn't ask for a better kind of management team in terms of wanting to get the best out of the system, and as kind of Andrew and other people at the UGs have spoken about, having executive support of the system is kind of a key kind of pillar in terms of getting the best out of an implementation and it not failing. We've got plans to do heavy duty reporting using Power BI via the XMR toolbox. And we've got ongoing products, including improving our client journey, custom client portal. And we use a number of third-party add-ons, including Click Dimensions, BusyGrid, and custom integrations developed by our partner. So that kind of setting the scene. Our planning and research phase, I had actually kind of knew about the Unify client a lot longer based on the talks that I'd been to at previous CRM UG events such as this one. I've probably known about it for a year longer than GovGrant have been aware of it. So when I joined, I kind of went, well, we need to start looking at Unify Client. We haven't got that long. At the time in September, we had about a year. The kind of date was October. We had a general overview meeting with our partner, and the idea is that I would handle a lot of the heavy lifting and our partner would carry on with the other big projects that we had going on. Our implementation also we have one sandbox, one production environment, and the decision was made to kind of upgrade sandbox before Christmas, so that I could have time to kind of get used to it, start moving things around, and really kind of get my teeth into the unified interface. In the meantime, I was going to be researching the recent 2019 release notes, looking at any new features that would support our users and help grow the business. Now, Google is a fantastic resource. I mean, Google itself, but actually just using the internet and searching for how do I do this? What is this? Using the release notes is a fantastic kind of resource. I will touch on some of the other resources at the end, and I do have a slide where there's loads of links to kind of the different resources, but on Twitter, there's a load of really good, fantastic people who are doing this day in and day out, who are sharing their knowledge, and it's a fantastic community for that. Once implemented in the sandbox, see what's broken, get it fixed, move on to the kind of the fun bit, start playing with the sitemap, the forms, the fields, and tidy all of this up, because when we went live back in 2017, it was a culmination, and this will probably be a similar story for a lot of small SMEs, is throwing together almost 3 or 4 different, in our case, access databases into one coherent CRM system. And there's a lot of duplication. There was a lot of fields that were doing the same thing. So it was a kind of a chance for us to reset that. It meant we could review all of the current processes and make some, even if they were slight improvements, but that's an opportunity that we perhaps wouldn't have again. Review the number of apps required for different arms of the business, with the aim to update production by the summer of 2020, well before, and at the time I wrote this slide, the 1st of October deadline. Of course, since then we knew it's been moved back to the December deadline. However, kind of spanner one is we had scheduled development work that ran over. I mean, this is kind of the name of the game. We had a go live in production of a custom integration that was at the end of November, and it went spectacularly wrong, to the point where if we put it in live, it would be overwriting data. We would lose quite a few records, and it was just, no, we've got to push back on this, start again, get it right, and then push it into live. It wasn't our developers' fault. This was actually the company that we were working with to pull data from their API, and the API just wasn't playing ball at all. It meant it pushed the update to Sandbox until after the festive period. But in order to kind of push the update project forward, I spun up a trial, because we can do that now, and actually it meant I could start playing with some of the new features, get used to the different admin portal size, where to find stuff, the new business process flows, all of that, and just get used to the the navigation, because if you've only known unified interface, you know the navigation is on the left hand side. But if all you've kind of known is the old deprecated web interface where all of your navigation's at the top, it's almost rewiring your brain to kind of make sure that you're pointing in the right direction. And then we come to Spanner 2. During my nightly Twitter binge, I follow, as I said, I follow a number of different really well thought of MVPs. And I apologize profusely. Yuka posted this in December, and it's like, have you checked out when your environments are scheduled to transition? And I saw this and I was like, oh dear, when is GovGrant's environments due to schedule over? Promptly logged in and saw that our sandbox was due to be upgraded on the 24th, and our production environment was due to be upgraded in February. And it was just like, okay, no, we can't have this. That's far too soon for our liking, because we hadn't done anything to kind of rectify any changes. We hadn't had a chance to play with it or anything like that. And at the time, my understanding is that we could only update this date twice. And with the fixes and the integrations issues, we knew that we kind of only had one shot at doing this properly. The decision was made to update, to actually bring forward the sandbox upgrade to the 10th of January, and the production update was pushed back to the Easter weekend, because that would give us 4 days to, without any users in the environment, to get it upgraded successfully, fully tested, and then rolled out on the Tuesday. With the moved up time frame to mid-April, kind of the decision has been made to create one app with all of the current functionality to save time, because as I intimated at the beginning, I wear many hats. I am essentially GovGrant's IT department, as well as their sister, as their kind of their CRM expert. And then once we've kind of gone live with the main app, we will then splinter it into various apps for the different departments and develop additional functionality in there. As at the time, we had 3 other projects that were being carried out kind of along the same time frames, with their go lives to also go live at the same time, or at least their first phases at the same time. So pre Cambridge Talk was the 13th of February. So by that point, the sandbox had been upgraded, the solution checking had been done. I'd updated all the third-party apps, made sure they were all working, and I'd done basic full end-to-end test of the current processes, so they were all working, they were all happy. We had a bunch of issues with our security roles. For some reason, we had loads of them. I'm not kidding, there was like 30 at one point, and we pared them down to kind of the core ones, and then any kind of so the ones that the kind of different teams needed, and then some additional ones for our super users, essentially. I think my biggest challenge was working out where I was supposed to be customizing from. That was kind of the biggest, not the barrier, but the biggest kind of wrapping my head around where to find everything. Obviously now it's make.powerapps.com. Go there, go to your environment, edit your app, edit your solutions from there. But when you're kind of used to doing it the old way, it was kind of getting used to how to customize the system. I have to admit, past Pippa on the sitemap was ending up having to put some buttons or putting sections on the sitemap that were pointing back to the old legacy customization just for speed, because we were running out of time at this point. I think the bit that I probably enjoyed the most was the sitemap spring cleaning. In terms of, we were going to treat each section as a functional department division, meaning that each area will have access to the entities that that group requires without having to switch area. Because this was our sitemap before we upgraded to Unified Client, and as you can probably see, it is a hot mess of everything is there. It meant the users could see things that they didn't need. It was just cluttered, it was messy, and most people didn't care about a lot of the things. So one of the things I enjoyed the most was actually streamlining it down to a nice navigation bar that only had the kind of core entities that they use. So this is an example of what our sales guys would use, and literally they would have dashboards, activities, their change requests, their lead information, their clients, some collateral, and that was it. And then what we would do is set, obviously preset this for our sales guys, and then at the bottom you can toggle here to go between different functional areas, and then we'd have one for technical specialists. So there are kind of post-sale support, and they actually write our reports for us, and they would have a slightly different kind of sitemap. They wouldn't necessarily see the sales literature or any of the prospect information, but it would just show them what they needed. It meant it was a lot cleaner. We didn't have people getting lost or anything like that, and it was just a better user experience for our users. Business process flows for me was quite a big change, and it was one that worried me the most, not in terms of functionality, but more in terms of user acceptance and user kind of buy-in. I think they're great. The fact that it's you don't have that kind of the old clunky business process flow with all of the fields shown all of the time, and it's kind of saving space, and it's allowing the forms to load a lot quicker. But it worried me because a lot of our functionality is based on the business process flows in general. And I loved the fact that you could, once we've done the full training, expand them and then fly them out to the right-hand side. Now, I love that feature. And I know now, looking back, after we did our whistle-stop tours with our users, a lot of them are now starting to use that feature. New features from the unified interface were announced in previous waves, can now be put into the sandbox. Things like the calendar interface, I have to admit, this is a big hit with my users now. There's some unified interface controls with number inputs and sliders to start off with. Again, this has been a big hit and something that was really, I think from my perspective, really easy to kind of do, but it made a big impact on the users. The timeline configuration, oh my good God, the fact that we have more control over the timeline in terms of sorting, hiding and showing was kind of a big deal for GovGrant. It meant that we could have a timeline that actually worked for us. And then we have another spanner, the Wave 1 2020 announcement. They released the announcement on the 27th of January, and it had some really interesting announcements, including Kanban views. I have to admit, I'm a very visual person. I loved the idea of this. And the kicker, the enforcement of Teams member licensing. Now, I don't know how common this is, but we're on the old style team member licensing at the moment, but we are going to be in trouble come January, I think, or whenever our renewal is. I think it's February, if we don't do something about this. The Kanban views, for the people who haven't seen this, is an idea that you could actually split, kind of have a more visual approach to opportunity and processing, and you can actually see all of your opportunities in kind of different silos. For example, the picture you can see on your screen is looking at the different stages of our opportunity, but you can easily flip it to looking at the open won and lost opportunities, and you can actually move the opportunities between silos. In the end, we didn't implement this because there wasn't time, but it's something I'm hoping to implement in the future. It's a nice feature which I think from a usability standpoint our users are going to love. I would say my friend, but Yuka, obviously a hotbed of kind of information, posted this, and the fact that they are putting in kind of stops and measures to enforce team member licensing. Originally it was penciled in for April. I think that's been pushed back, and somebody will have to correct me, until much later in the year. But it's something we needed to be kind of aware of in this phase of creation of the apps and going forward. So our next phase, whilst we were waiting for full confirmation about the situation, so one thing I did is I went to my partner and went, go and find out what the licensing situation is, because I'm not a licensing expert. I can obviously interpret it one way, but it might not be the correct way. So I've asked him to actually go and find out what we need to do to be compliant. Whilst we're waiting for that, we determined to continue development of a full app as planned, along with the three projects. We would then start to invite our power users to view the app, gather feedback on core functionality in the forms, kind of gently introduce them to the new style, because I think that was going to be our biggest barrier. Don't ever underestimate how the look and the feel of Dynamics, just even a little change has a huge impact on your users. The business process flow I always knew was going to be a hurdle, but just moving a couple of fields on a form, oh my good God, sometimes the kickback you get from that is horrific in some cases. The plan was eventually to create a separate team's licensing compliant app with complete pared down functionality, which is completely compliant for a team member license, mainly because we've got a lot of contractors who only need access to read-only data. But there was we've got a custom entity which kind of does a similar thing to opportunities. And that was the question I had for our partner, is just like, is this compliant for team member licensing? I'm still waiting for that answer. So answers on a postcard if you know the answer to that question. It meant if we did this at the same time, users would be using the new app, which isn't available yet, and will still have access to the full app. It meant at the time when we made the switch to the team member only app, it would be a smooth transition. So we were co-developing the two apps at the same time to look exactly the same. The sitemap would be the same. It would just be the functionality, underlying functionality would be a little bit different. User adoption and rollout. I think this is quite important. I mean, because obviously I'm in kind of inbuilt on the company, I'm responsible for the user adoption, rolling out, making sure the training. And one thing that my boss said, which kind of really hit me, was it's all very well you developing all of these lovely new features, but if nobody knows how to use it, what's the point? And the plan was to kind of go live with the Easter weekend. We're going to be moving our users out of their comfort zone. So the plan was to train the users with whistle-stop tools in the preceding weeks, update all of the help articles on our new LMS platform with new videos, and after go live, review the work, splitting out the core apps into team member apps. And then we get to February. So at the point we're still rattling along, everything's going well. I presented basically everything you've seen to the Cambridge user group. I think it went pretty well. I had a fantastic time as always. And we were ramping up to finish documentation testing to go live at the beginning of April. And then two things happened. One of the reasons is why we're all doing this virtually and not in front of you, in front of a room. And the other is I got a chest infection. So I was out of action for a couple of weeks. I wasn't fully up to speed. And obviously the other one was lockdown in this country. And as I said, I'm the company's IT department. So I was having to roll up Teams because we were using Skype for Business, but that really wasn't fit for purpose. So I had to bring myself up to speed with that, get everybody on board, make sure that everybody had IT equipment, because we had a lot of desktops that we couldn't send home with people. So we were delayed by about 3 weeks, and it was mainly the documentation and the videos that were delayed. So the decision was made to push the upgrade back to mid-May. So we didn't hit our Easter deadline because we took the decision early to move it back. We actually had to put in a ticket with Microsoft to determine whether we could move it back a second time after we had moved it, just in case the mid-May deadline didn't work. But this gave us more time for testing, documentation, and debugging. And it also meant I could creep in a few nice to haves. So I'm going to whittle through this slide. Some of the nice to haves: icons on views. I mean, is it a unified interface only feature? I can't remember, but just a little kind of splash of color on our new implementation or our new app was kind of really key, and I know the users are loving that now. Using one of my kind of go-to tools, the XMR toolbox, to update all of the custom icons. Again, this is obviously a community tool, and I can't sing its praises enough in terms of its usage. It's so useful for a non-developer as I am. I'm just a customizer. It's a fantastic tool. I mean, this is where I fangirl Scott. The ribbon workbench in there is a fantastic resource, and it's kind of dug me out of a few holes in terms of hiding buttons that perhaps some of our users shouldn't be using and seeing. So if you're not using this, go and have a look at it, because it's fantastic. The Iconator tool is the tool I use for or used to revamp all of the icons, because obviously we were using 16 by 16 images, and we needed to transfer them all into vector images. There was a chance to kind of look at the interactive dashboards. Now, due to timing and the fact, as my boss said, we need that documentation next week, Pippa, stop messing around with dashboards, it's something that did actually slip in the nice to haves. Because he wanted a new work package out the door, I've popped in a couple of links in terms of the customizing the icons and the updating the icons for the unified interface, and obviously the XMR toolbox with the Iconator. Then we get to May, beginning of May. I've got my beginning of the month stuff out the window, and we've got 2 weeks to go. It's kind of running through your standard end-to-end testing of absolutely everything. I'm pretty much a tester at heart, and it's just throw everything at a system and see if I can break it. I'm probably happiest when I'm doing that, if I'm brutally honest. Create all the video tutorials and update all of the wiki articles, and at the end of the second week, freeze everything, including all the other projects in Sandbox, and start building out our solutions. Clear Aim basically left me alone to do a lot of this work, but it's now 2 weeks to go that Nathan and the guys really got involved in terms of supporting me in getting this upgrade through. Then the week to go, we had our shakedown with Nathan, any last minute checking. We had our last whistles tours with the users, took the super users through. So our super users were going to be really important on go live day, in terms of they would field any questions of, where has Pippa put this, or where is that field, or how do I do this? So I could concentrate on the day on bugs, anything that's actually physically broken in our system. And then the night before, I had the great pleasure of kicking all of our users out by the admins, and actually implementing security groups, because this is something that we hadn't done, and to get a good night's sleep, because I knew the weekend was going to be a long one. So I'm just going to take a bit of a pause. Have we got any questions, Scott?
Yeah, we've got Callum just asked a question. Did you have to replace any existing dialogues? Great question.
No, because we didn't use them. No, we didn't use them. We didn't use dialogues. Is that it?
That's all the questions so far, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So the night before, we kind of gently kicked out the users, kind of explained to them that if they did need any data, that they should email me, and I'd be able to get it out for them if they burningly needed to do anything with a prospect. But generally, I think most of my users were quite happy to have the weekend off. And then we come to the upgrade weekend, and everything was really not fine. I have to admit, I've not done many upgrades. I helped out with the version 9 for going from version 8 to version 9, and that was purely more of a cosmetic upgrade. This was probably my first solo upgrade in terms of actually getting my teeth into this and doing a lot of the work. And my experience from previous kind of mini upgrades and the sandbox upgrade is they upgrade it overnight. You get a nice email from Microsoft the next morning. And then I'm getting antsy because by the evening of Saturday, I still hadn't had that email. And I'm sitting there going, oh my good God, what's going on? By Sunday lunchtime, we still hadn't received an email. So Nathan and ClearAim had, I think, 2 other customers also upgrading that weekend. And they also hadn't received any emails. We'd been logging in and we'd been able to see that it looked like we were upgraded, but we hadn't been told, but it hadn't fully got rid of the old legacy app. So we were kind of like, ooh, should we start work on this to actually get the new sitemap on, kind of make all of our changes? In the end, we decided to raise a ticket with Microsoft because it was the safest thing to do in terms of, I wouldn't say getting permission, but making sure that we weren't actually going to do serious damage to our environment or lose any data. And during that kind of discussion with Microsoft, we couldn't really wait. We couldn't afford to wait any longer. It was either do this now in May or we'd have to wait until, I would probably say, second week in August, possibly October, November would be our next shot. And my boss had already kind of gone to the board and said, yeah, well, no, we'll do it by May. So no pressure. So with Microsoft's, I would say, half blessing, we started work and it was a complete disaster. Our solution import was a complete nightmare. I suspect I'm preaching to the choir on everybody on this call. Nothing was going in. Microsoft kind of reassured us it wasn't anything there, and so we had to start from scratch. We had to create a basic app on the fly, as we then tried porting. As the one we tried porting over was completely corrupted, it just wasn't going over. So we started from scratch. Piece by piece, we rebuilt the solution, porting over little bits of customization one at a time. Basically, myself and Nathan were on a Teams call for about 6 or 7 hours, just piecing together bit by bit, making sure we weren't missing anything and making sure that our app was ready. By about 9:30, it was all in and it was handed back fully to me to test it. But by 11:30 at night, minimal testing was done, which was pretty good. And I started to put the users back in. Unfortunately, all of the mailboxes were now failing and I had to put in another ticket with Microsoft. Now, I will say hats off to Microsoft. They were very responsive in terms of responding to tickets this week, that particular weekend. And fortunately, I was able to go to bed at 1:30 in the morning, ready for an early start. It turns out I think they said there was about 6,000 environments being upgraded that weekend, and the emails were just being backlogged They weren't coming out as quickly as perhaps they hoped, but they also weren't upgrading the portal. The portal that Juncker showed us, that I showed you in a previous slide, that portal wasn't being updated. It was still showing as not upgraded when actually we had been upgraded. We finally got the email at 2:41 on the Monday morning, which is, I am quite glad I wasn't still awake at that point. Our go live day was the 18th of May. It was an early start for me, just to kind of go in, last minute checks, and then releasing it to our users. And on the whole, the go live day went pretty smoothly, considering the kind of burning kind of pit of hell the weekend was. Go live day was really good. We had a couple of issues, like I forgot to put one user in, which was my bad. We've got two people with a very similar names, and I put one in the security group and I hadn't put the other in the security group. It happens. But I think that was probably the worst thing that happened on the day. I had a Teams drop-in meeting for all of the troubleshooting. How-to questions were directed to our super users, but again, it was quite quiet. I had a go live catch up with the partner and Nathan and the CEO last thing at night, and then I went to bed about 6 o'clock, because actually the go live day actually went really well. Nathan said to me afterwards he'd actually penciled in to do go live support for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but the work that we'd done over the weekend and actually getting it right meant that our users were happy. They were all back in the environment, and the comments we got on the kind of implementation and what we did were really favourable, which was fantastic. Looking back 2 months on, I mean, would I have done anything differently knowing what I do now? I mean, hell yeah. I wouldn't have been so ambitious in terms of doing some of the extra work, but we couldn't predict what was going to happen on the go live weekend. We couldn't predict that there was going to be a backlog of 6,000 environments going live that weekend. I think probably the one thing I would do differently is not be so ambitious. I wouldn't try and sneak in so much new functionality. Bad Pippa. She knows better now than past Pippa does. But on the whole, I think it was a good experience, apart from, obviously, I mean, looking back in hindsight, it was a very long weekend, but I wouldn't say they were impressed with the functionality and the whole look and feel. The user adoption has been very good. There's obviously a few grumbles, but you get that with everything that's going on. And I think because we've lost that in-person training, I think that was kind of the biggest blow to us, because obviously it's had to be done all through Teams. You haven't got that in-person interaction. You haven't necessarily been able to tailor the information as perhaps as well as we could have. So what's next for GovGrant? We've got work on a portal. This was one of the other projects that was going on. It kind of took a back seat whilst we were doing the unified client. Now it is full on, and we're looking to go live in September. I'm going to pick up the interactive dashboards because I think that's something that GovGrant can use, but also along with the Power BI stuff. And the licensing question is very much still outstanding. Do we shunt all of our users over to power ups per user per app per user? Do we have to buy some additional full licenses? That is really much a kind of nightmare that we've still got to deal with. And what's next for me? I'm probably going to go for my, well, it won't be called MB200 by the time I actually get round to doing the certification. And I'm also looking to go from absolutely no code to maybe a tiny smidgen of code. I finally put live my first piece of proper JavaScript on hiding and showing tabs, which I'm really proud of. Going to be looking into Canvas apps and starting to think about moving our workflows away from workflows and into Power Automate. Now, I'm not going to take credit for, I mean, some of the work I'm going to take credit for because it's mine, but I wouldn't have been able to get there without the huge range of fantastic community resources, Microsoft resources, and just general. Shout out to the kind of the D365 regional and kind of national events. Not only are they a wash of inspiration, you've got people like Scott, you've got people like Andrew, you've got people like Ferridin, you've got all these people who've been around in the kind of space for years and are willing to kind of spend time with you to answer your questions, which may seem very stupid to you, but they're not stupid questions. They really aren't. I suffer greatly with imposter syndrome as it is, and they are fantastic in terms of if you do want to reach out. I'm not so much, I think, was it Sam at the beginning of the day was talking about reaching out. I'm a bit more cautious. I worry that I'm bothering people, so I'm more of a passive kind of consumer of knowledge rather than reaching out so much. But you've got people like Emma, who was recently, I think, awarded MVP status. Her blog on Tattooed CRM Girl is fantastic. You've got the Microsoft release plans, the release plan for Wave 2. There is some brilliant stuff in there. The mobile app, I'm so looking forward to getting my hands on that, because for my sales guys, that's going to be huge. The Microsoft Docs and Learning are very bite-sized and really good to kind of just pick up for like 30-40 minutes in kind of learning. Julian Sharp, and this is where I fangirl a bit based on Sam's fanboying earlier on. He ran an MB200 study group earlier in the year, and I learnt so, I mean, I knew how to use the old one, but I think one of my biggest hurdles has been moving away from the old customization kind of navigation and not being so frightened to use the new one. And he gave me some very good tips, hints and tricks in terms of getting used to the new one. Mainly it was pointed towards the exam, but actually I learned so much just that I could apply to my day-to-day, and he's got a fantastic blog. Then you've got things like Joe Gill's blog, Dynamics Weekly, CRM Tip of the Day, but on Twitter and LinkedIn, literally you can fall over people who are willing to help, people who are posting really good resources. And I cannot kind of emphasize enough that most of what I know has either come from my mentor at my previous job or from kind of looking online. But there is absolutely no replacement for getting your hands dirty. Spin up a trial, go and start playing. That's, for me, that's the only way I learn. And you can just have a play. You're not hurting anybody. I've got a developer environment that I've been installed on my tenant, and I just play in there. That's kind of my sandbox, Pippa's personal sandbox, to just go and have a play. I mean, the Matt's talk, the previous one, where he's looking at embedding Canvas apps. I cannot wait to go and have a play with that, because I've got so many different ideas. Now, I think I'm going to shut up. Thank you so much for listening, and bang on time. That was my alarm just going off. Thank you very much for listening. GovGrant's journey is obviously from a CRM or Dynamics 365 perspective is still going on, but our journey to the unified client, I think we're there.
Excellent. Wow. Just wow, Pippa. What an awesome presentation. This is, for me, this is exactly what the D365 user group is about. It's like this sharing of real world experience in a kind of an open and honest way, and it's just absolute gold dust. So thank you ever so much for that. I mean, if anyone's got any questions that they want they can just put into the chat. Feel free to do that. And Pippa's kindly put up her LinkedIn and Twitter there, so you can reach out to her. But yeah, really, really great stuff. So the recordings of this will be up on d365ug.com/UK, and also on YouTube, and you'll be able to grab the slides from there as well. So, you know, share as much as you can with your colleagues and friends as well, so they can all kind of learn from this experience. So fantastic stuff. Quick reminder, fill in your feedback form and give Pippa some fantastic feedback. And also, if you want to put your email in there, there's somewhere you can put in a section where you can put in your email to win a copy of David Yak's Power Automate course that Andy was talking about in the kickoff session. So we'll be grabbing a list of all the names at around 4:45. So really encourage you to get that feedback submitted. Other than that, all that remains is to thank you all for attending, and thank you ever so much, Pippa.
You're very welcome. I mean, I definitely believe in the community, and I think I wouldn't have got as far as I could without. I'm going to do a special shout out to Joe Anslow, who basically taught me, I wouldn't say everything I know, but a lot of what I know. But I wouldn't have got as far as I had without access to a fantastic kind of resource library. So yeah, I mean, it's all about empowering each other. I mean, yes, I work for an end user, but that doesn't stop me reaching out to people like Scott, like Andrew, like everybody. If I was maybe bit more brave. But yeah, so if you've got any questions about your kind of unified client journey, feel free to reach out.
Richard actually has just said, can he ask a question? So yeah, go ahead, Richard. Richard, are you there? Speak to us. If not, perhaps you can catch up with Pippa offline. And yeah, so we look forward to hearing about the future journey of GovGrant and yourself in, you know, the next installment of this epic journey.
Maybe it's the portals next.
Yes, absolutely. Look forward to having you back. Great stuff.
Hey, I think I saw Richard come off mute there for a minute.
Yes, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Sorry, my Teams wasn't playing ball. Thanks very much, Pippa. I was at your Cambridge presentation when you were.
I remember.
Staring down the barrel of doing this. Rather, lots of. Well, I sort of work with a not-for-profit that is looking at the same problem, but has sort of stuck its head in the sand. I have two specific questions. I know I asked last time, and I can't remember what the answers were, but Scott might be able to throw some light on them as well, which is that the application I'm involved with has a lot of JavaScript that's using the old, and again, my technical knowledge, the old namespace, which I think has been deprecated, and also has a lot of web components that are using the old API. And we've got to make some sort of decision in terms of, you know, moving to the new UI, whether we try and tackle those two problems at the same time, or whether we leave those to another day. I mean, it's interesting that one of your key takeaways is do as little as possible in terms of beyond the bare minimum. But I mean, as far as I'm aware, Scott, there is still no cutoff date for those two deprecations. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. At the moment, there is no concrete date. They will normally give a year notice of when something's actually going to be removed. But yeah, they certainly. I think you're referring to the XRM page API. Is that, or you referring to the SOAP API?
Yes. Thank you for filling in the gaps. No, that's the one.
Yeah, certainly the SOAP API is probably, I would say, there's probably more sites on the SOAP API than there are on the XRM page API, but certainly both of those things, yeah, that watch out there will be probably an announcement at some point to say, okay, this is the date when they're going to disappear. So it probably would be a good time to start to invest in moving away from them if you can.
I mean, from GovGrant's perspective and my perspective, we don't have that much. I mean, we don't have that much JavaScript. So as I said, I'm going from no code to I'm starting to write code, because a bit further background, I actually have a PhD, if you could believe that, in biomaterials for bone tissue engineering. So I've done some coding in my time. No JavaScript though. And I've started this. It's like hiding and showing tabs. How do you do that without JavaScript? You can't really use it. I love the business rules and how they work, but I wanted to hide and show tabs, so I had to get my hands dirty and actually start doing this. And the recommendation I got from Joe and Nathan was start with the old version of JavaScript and then do a find and replace to take out the old bit and put in the form context get attribute stuff. And that's how I've learned, as I've written it in the old style and then did basically find and replace to remove the old one. As I said, we don't have that much JavaScript. Any JavaScript we have is already been moved over. And actually, shout out to Nathan. He's done a lot of the heavy lifting on that. That was basically his one task, was to move all the JavaScript. In terms of the API stuff, I believe all of our API was not SOAP based anyway, and I'm not an expert on that. So I can't really ask you that.
That's helpful. Thanks.
Can I offer a
really excellent presentation. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Sorry for talking. I offer a tip on the JavaScript side, which is to use Solution Checker. I don't know if you've played with that yet. Anybody played with that? But you will have that will flag up where you're using JavaScript that is going to be deprecated, like xrm.page. I was doing that last week with a customer. So yeah, that's a useful little tool, Solution Checker.
Yeah,
you run that.
Been run, and we know we've got a lot that does need to be changed. It's a question of whether we try and change that now or change it, later. And it's a question of timing rather than anything else. But it's also some of that functionality we might want to replace with a Canvas app. The sort of thing that was shown previously. That's the problem. We don't want to fix a whole stack of stuff and then find that we throw that away. That's. I mean, there's a whole stack of web components that almost certainly at some point, when the time and money permits, could be replaced by Canvas apps. But it's a question of finding the time and money to do that. And do we need to fix those in the interim, or just leave it until at least we've got a date by which we know we have to get it done?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, really, is that maybe just leave it until you do get a date. I was just reading the docs the other day, and it's that they haven't set a date for xrm.page because they know so many people are still using it. So it will happen sooner or later, but then at least you've got a timeline to work to.
Yeah. No, that's very helpful. Thanks. Another brilliant day.
Next section is going to be the Ask the Expert session in 5 minutes time. So if you want to head over that, we'll resume there.
That's back in the auditorium where we were earlier. I will drop a link in the chat.
Great stuff, and thanks again, Pippa.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.